everyone, I'm Janine Malone,
And I'm Kristen Ciccolini.
and you're listening to It's Just a Phase. Each week, we'll bring you inspiring and informative conversations about honoring the different cycles of life, covering topics of health and wellness, moon phases, astrology, witchcraft, feminism, and more so you can superpower your well-being and live your best life.
Yes.
Happy Halloween!
Happy Halloween. Oh, I'm so excited. Or I would be if
I remember excitement.
what is fun? I don't know. We can still have fun.
Yeah. What are you going to do for this Halloween?
I'm not gonna dress up. Are you?
Sure. No. I mean, I don't ever really dress up.
I'm kind of imagining something really sad with like people just dressing up, getting all dolled up in their costume and face makeup just to like sit on Zoom.
Oh my God, that's the most depressing. That is a spooky thought
That
right
is
there.
spooky, yeah.
Oh my God, that's so
Oh,
funny. Yeah, I think we'll just do like a movie, watch a movie, probably eat some candy, light a candle. I don't know. It'll be
yeah.
low key, but you know what?
I mean, it is like the best witchiest combination this year. It's Saturday, it's a full moon, it's Halloween,
I
it's
know. Ugh,
but well, I
who
mean,
knows?
you know what? I feel like there's a lot of pressure to go out on Halloween, so this year it's just like just do your thing, you know?
Ooh, love that.
Yeah.
Love that as a vibe. Don't worry
What
about it. Just stay home.
what was your favorite costume as a kid?
That's a good question. Let's see. I remember having maybe when I was like 12 or 13, maybe younger. I remember dressing up. I was very inspired by Romy and Michelle's high school reunion.
Oh my God,
And I
yes.
had like a pink dress with like a fluffy pink boa around the bottom that my mom made. My mom's an amazing like seamstress and sewer, so she made all my costumes growing up.
Mine did too,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, which I like love so much. So that was probably my personal favorite. I will say that my first Halloween, um, she made a costume where I was a half-hatched chicken. So like the bottom was an egg and I
That's
was
cute.
popping out of it, which was a neighborhood fave, a family fave, if you will. What about you?
Well, my mom made lots of different ones. The one that sticks out in my mind was this clown
Oh
costume
my
that
God.
she made. I was really little, and I mean, it was bright yellow, red, and she made a little hat to go with it. And I
Oh,
had all the face paint. And what was really funny is I found that costume so she sold the house that we grew up in. A few years ago, a couple years ago, and I found the costume and I obviously couldn't fit it in anymore, but I could still stick my arms in it.
oh
So
my God.
I put it on the top of me and put the hat on and like walked over to her.
Oh my
And
God.
I even have pictures like comparing like when I was little. That was a great
Oh
costume.
my God, that's incredible. That's so amazing. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
like I really loved the um like the memories of my mom making them, you know? I
Yeah.
think that's like
I
really
think it was a
special
lot
and
more normal for that to happen back then. Like now you just like buy it at the store.
oh, totally. And they're just like the grossest material, like make you so sweaty.
Yeah.
Ugh, I remember like in my like peak teenage rebellion being like, I don't want you to make my costume. I just want to buy one like everyone else. And then like buying it and like being out, whatever, trick or
Yeah.
treating and being like, oh, I'm like so sweaty and disgusting. This is like horrible. And I just saw my costume on five other people. So
Yeah,
sad.
exactly.
I
Yeah,
don't know
I've
how
been a
good
few
we have
different
it.
things. She made a witch costume, obviously. She made
Yes.
she made me a tooth fairy costume.
Oh my God, that's a good one.
They're all pretty good. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, so like I said, full moon this week. So cosmic update. It's a full moon week. This is the Halloween Hunter's blue moon. So it's a lot of different
Ooh,
things.
cool.
And a blue moon is the second of two full moons in 1 month. So we started the month on the first with a full moon. And it's the Halloween Hunter's blue moon in all time zones as well. So it's a very magical time. And just a little history lesson. The last time we had a Halloween full moon in Central and Pacific time zones, it was 19 years ago in 2001. So it happens roughly every 19 years in simultaneously for Halloween full moon. But the last time it was for all time zones was 1944, which is
Wow.
crazy. Yeah. So it's a nice time to celebrate. And I think it'll be fun to just like do your own thing again this weekend. Um, and also, a I looked this up in the Farmer's Almanac, but some people believe that this full moon was called the full hunter's moon because it signaled the time to go hunting in preparation for winter.
Mm.
Since after you harvest, you reap the fields under the harvest moon, which is the full moon before this one. And after that, hunters could easily see the deer and other animals that came out. And so that's why they call it the harvest moon or hunter's moon. Sorry.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
really, I really love how like practical all of the names of the moons tend to be, you know? Like
Yeah.
it's like they sound so spooky and witchy now because we don't live off the land. We you know,
Yeah.
we have electricity and all those things, but it's like yeah, when you just think about it, it's like, "Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
Right time to do it."
it just tells you what's going on. It's kind of like when we follow the actual moon phases, we know that waxing things are building, waning things are winding down. But with
Yeah.
the actual names of the moons, like there's the travel moon and the dying grass moon. Like they tie it to the season's activities, so you kind of know what's happening when. And yeah, dying grass moon sounds pretty spooky.
I kind of love that.
Yeah.
And that is really what's happening. Like I can concur.
Yeah. So yeah, that's full moon, blue moon, and Halloween moon. Also Samhain, which is New Year. It's a time
Yes.
for connection with the other side, which is kind of, where Halloween comes from.
Yes. Yeah. So actually, how Samhain became Halloween, it's obviously Samhain is a pagan holiday. And while a lot of holidays with pagan roots like Easter and Christmas were overtaken by Christians,
Right.
um, this attempt like never really stuck. Maybe it was just a little too spooky and witchy and magical for them. Um, but they named November 1st All Saints Day or All Hallows Day because hallow is another word for saint or holy person. And so October 31st became All Hallows Eve, which is kind of a fun, again, just a lot of history lessons here on It's Just a Phase today.
Yeah. And so, if you're looking for some things to do this weekend to honor that, I have a Samhain spread up on my Instagram. We'll link to it in the show notes, but it's just a 5 card spread. And the first card is the lesson of this year which is New Year. Second card, what seeds to plant for the next year, what needs to be cleared, what will hurt, and what will help. So I did that last year and I really liked the outcome of that. So I'll share that with you again in the show notes. Do you do any particular spreads at this time
Um,
or reading?
I don't necessarily do it around on Halloween specifically or with Samhain in mind, but I definitely do like for fall in general. The way I kind of structure a lot of my spreads is about like shedding, like kind of like you're saying, like what am I working through and getting to the other side of.
Hmm.
Um and that's really helpful for like I should probably put this on my own Instagram at some point. So maybe I'll do that so we can talk or link to it. But right now I'm really hyper focused on my readings being around like what is abundant and what you're kind of like using as kindling, what's going dormant, like really starting to think about kind of the same way we were talking about the hunter's moon, like what it's time to prepare for, you know,
Mm, I
as
like
we step
that.
into this new phase, a new season, kind of new year for the witches.
Yeah,
And
I
I'll
like
just
that.
take honestly any chance, any new year opportunity. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's start over. So I'm excited for that.
You can also do some ancestral work. So, like we said, this is the time where the veil between the worlds is the thinnest, and it will stay that way over the next few months. So, you might want to make an ancestral altar if you want to. I recommend the book Honoring Your Ancestors by Mallory Vaudois. I think that's how you say her name, I hope. And I actually took a class in Brooklyn with her last year. She did an ancestral witchcraft workshop and she talked all about this stuff. It was really interesting. So definitely check out her book. But one thing that stuck out to me was that she mentioned your ancestors don't have to necessarily be blood relatives. So whether you don't know much about your lineage or you know a little too much about your lineage and you're not thrilled with it, you can also honor other types of ancestors. So she talked about if you, for instance, if you're married, maybe it's your in-laws ancestors, or it could be your spirit guides or affinity ancestors. So yeah, I liked that part, especially because I know that a lot of people don't have ancestors that they really want to revere. So yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I love that. I think that's really helpful. And it's something that I kind of always think about this time of year as well, is just like if there are resources or ways I can connect to even just more like my lineage's approach to witchcraft and magic. Like I'm always trying to reclaim more of like a Celtic spirituality rather than just uh, taking what's not
Mhm.
mine. So it's a good
Yeah.
time to do that too if you feel called to. And that kind of reminds me of like not necessarily thinking of your ancestors as blood relatives, but just like the rituals and practices of your heritage.
Yeah, and aren't if an altar is not something that you're going to do, and the easy way to do this is also to leave a piece or a little bit of food on your plate for your ancestors. So that's like a nice thing that you can offer. Um, or just to keep a glass of water on your altar or whatever you want to do.
We're just going to keep, reminding everyone every cosmic update until we don't need to anymore. Get out there and vote. 'Tis the
Vote, vote,
season.
vote.
Smash the patriarchy. That is the greatest treat of all. The fact that we have this right that we can exercise. So please go do it.
Yeah, so well, hopefully by now, if you were planning to do early voting, you've gotten your ballot in. Um,
Yes.
but I think it's also a good reminder to bring up what we said last week was to just treat yourself because there's
Yeah.
there's not much you can do once you put your ballot in until we get the results. So just try not to focus too much on all the potential things that could happen and take a little bit of time to breathe and relax, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, on a lighter note, The Craft is coming out again.
Oh my God.
Or The
You bet it
Craft
is.
Legacy, the reboot. That's happening this week on the 28th. I think it's going to be available on streaming services, or I think you can rent it, like one of those $20 rentals, which I don't know if I'll actually do, but we'll see.
Sure.
But Pam Grossman consulted on it, the author of
Oh, that's
Waking the
cool. I
Witch.
didn't
Yeah.
know that.
And also interesting to note that Rachel True from the original, she just came out with a tarot deck.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah, it's really pretty. I think it's called the True Heart deck. I don't know. I'll
Uh,
have to look into that. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. But
I love
yeah,
that so much.
so maybe you can pick that up and have yourself a craft Halloween.
I mean, that's kind of the only Halloween I'm interested in,
Yeah, same.
TBH.
And well, that brings us in today's topic. So speaking of tarot,
Yes, we are so excited. We're doing today's episode all about tarot.
woohoo!
Tarot is something we both use personally in our business. Well, personally as our in our spiritual practices, but also in our businesses. And we get a lot of questions about working with it. So we figured, what better time than Halloween week to kind of dive in? In our humble opinions, Tarot is an incredibly useful and powerful tool. That being said, there is so much we could dive into in this conversation and keep you guys here for hours and hours. Like the editing process for this episode was intense. But we thought it would be fun to just give like a really brief overview of the deck and some of its themes and uses, along with each of our relationships with the tarot and some more resources. So if you like are feeling called to learn more, or something strikes your fancy, you have a place that you can go look for that. So yeah, I'm pumped.
I am
Love
too.
it. This is just like going to be so fun. But first of all, what is tarot? This feels like
Good place to
fun.
start.
Yeah, good place to start. A funny question to answer, but I mean, very literally, it's a 78 card deck traditionally used as a divination tool. The tarot has Italian roots. Tarocchi? Would you say it like that? You say it. You're the Italian here.
It's Tadoki.
Oh, see, so
The
much better than what
C,
I said.
the CHI is a key sound.
Oh,
Yeah.
literally had no idea. Okay, and tarot in in Italian, which I'm not even going to attempt to do again, is traces back to the 14th century. So it's an old ass tool that people have been using for a really long time. That's my summary there. That's not to say that I don't want to talk about tarot history. I think it's very fascinating, and like at this point there have been thousands of interpretations and iterations of tarot through time. There like that could be a whole episode in and of itself, but we're very lucky to get to live in a time where there are so many beautiful decks, so many incredible practitioners and readers and interpretations. And so yeah, it's just like I think one of my favorite things about tarot in general, because I'm such a like a visual person, is getting to see all these different um visual interpretations of the energies and how they can kind of communicate. And I'm
Mhm.
curious, Kristen, like what deck you use personally.
Well, I have a running list. So speaking of all the many beautiful decks out there, I literally have a running list of notes or decks in my notes app of ones that I want to buy. But the one up until recently, I've been using the traditional Rider Waite. I preferred it because I wanted to really learn the imagery and the symbolism and all that. But now that I have a handle on that, I moved into other decks that are a little bit more abstract, or ones that have taken some artistic liberties with each of the cards, which, it just adds a whole other layer to your interpretations, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so right now I'm using the Neo Tarot, which is beautifully illustrated, and it's intended to focus more on self-care. So also looking in the guidebook is all about self-care too. So um, definitely something I felt called to in 2020. So I bought that earlier this year. And sometimes I'll add another layer to a reading and use an oracle deck. And for that, I really love the Amenti Oracle. Have you seen that one?
No,
Oh, I'll send you a picture of it. It's really pretty.
please.
Um, but yeah, also I was gonna say I don't know if this is weird, but I also sleep with my new decks when I get them.
Oh my God, I love that.
I put them in my pillowcase, like underneath, like obviously, so it's not like the corner of the box is not like
Cards
sticking in
everywhere.
my ear.
Yeah.
But I put them underneath my pillow for like a week because I feel like it infuses my energy with them. Is that weird?
Ooh, no, I love that. I think that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I really want the Marigold tarot. Have you seen that one? It's the one with like the gold. It's black and gold pretty much.
no,
It's
that sounds
beautiful.
amazing. I
But
feel like I
you
have to just avoid looking at
I know.
new decks because I'm just like, I want them all.
Seriously, there's so many gorgeous ones out there, but you use a really beautiful one.
I do. I use the Lioness Oracle. She's my tried and true. I think that imagery is just so gorgeous and really gentle. Particularly, like I was drawn to this deck to use specifically in client readings because a lot of the readings that I do are, I actually tend to read for a lot of people who are not super familiar with tarot, and I find that a lot there are some decks that the imagery can be like very intimidating. So if like a card gets
Yeah.
pulled, the person who's sitting there is like terrified immediately,
Like the
which isn't,
tower or death or
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, obviously, I think that just kind of colors the experience. So I really love the Lioness Oracle. I also find that there are some really beautiful like themes running through it that really resonate with me. Just like some of the florals she uses, some of the like, there's like butterflies on certain cards that are really transformative. And I don't know, I just really, really resonate with it. And it feels very loving, which is also just like something I find to be like my flavor of reading for clients.
Yeah, I like the style of it, like the collage kind of
Yeah.
artwork.
Yeah, it's really special. And then personally, I have really enjoyed using the Spolia Tarot, which if I actually don't believe they're printing them anymore, but it's really gorgeous and it delivers me a lot of richness and real talk. I don't use that deck with clients because it actually feels like it's like this is going to sound silly, but like some decks feel very like approachable and like you can get a lot of um yeah, like the Lioness Oracle I guess just feels like much gentler. The Spolia feels like every single card I pull has like an hour's worth of like interpretation to it. Like there's just like a denseness to it that like
Mhm.
would make it really difficult, I think, to for me personally to use in readings, but I like to use it for myself, especially for single card pulls because it just feels really lush. Um and then my first like real deck, I guess like as an adult, was the Spirit Speak deck. And yes, I did buy it for myself. So before anyone asks.
As you should.
Um yes, exactly. And I still actually as we were prepping for this episode, I was like, "Oh, I should like pull that guy back out." And like see what's up, Like I feel like it came to me at such a transformative time in my life that like it feels weird to use it outside of that period of time, but I don't know,
Yeah.
kind of inspired me.
Yeah,
So,
actually, I when we were preparing, I when you asked like what tarot decks I use, I was just like, "Oh, I have so many that I just completely forgot about, because
right.
you get so focused on certain ones for a period of time."
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's like, yeah, it just feels like an old journal or something that like you
Yeah, it
keep,
does.
but yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
I'm curious, like, how did you come to tarot? Like, how did you get into it in the first place?
I think I told this story in a different episode, but long story short, it was with the help of my BFF, Crystal. So years ago, she gave me that Gypsy Witch deck. It was a deck of playing cards, which are intended for divination, and it has the interpretations right on them. So I kind of learned like the gist of it like that way. So that was helpful. And then I naturally just went on from there to actual tarot cards because she reads cards too, and I took an interest in the readings she had done for me and also just hearing about ones she had done on her own and for other people. So it's not a super interesting story. But yeah, and not something I was ever really super vocal about. Um, one, because my family already thinks I'm weird enough, and two, I also so Dan's family has readers in there, who have some not so great experiences with the cards in terms of things that were predicted that were a little frightening. So it just it turned into my private practice. But
Yeah.
I've been more open about it the last couple years or so, especially like I started posting readings on Twitter and Instagram for a little while. And last year I did like wellness related readings. It was just something new that I was trying. So yeah, I like to play around with different ways of using it. And I do have his mother's deck of mini tarot cards from the 60s, which is awesome.
Oh my God,
And
that's amazing.
I keep those in my purse as like my travel deck.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah, they're really cute. They're so small.
Oh my God, I bet.
They're like doll tarot cards.
It's kind of amazing.
What about you?
Um, well, I mean, I'll skip the description of my like younger pagan Wiccan experiments because I think a lot of us maybe share that. I recently watched season 2 of Pen 15, and like that
Yes,
episode
you
was,
saw it. So good.
oh my God. I was like, this is like hard to watch. You know what I mean? It
That
just felt, I
whole
mean,
show is hard to watch, but that's like, our middle school years were hard to live through. So
oh, well, exactly, exactly. So I definitely related to that. I mean, I had um like an older neighbor who was like really into like Wicca and stuff when I was much younger, and I think that I just like wanted to be her, so I
Mm,
I got really into it when I was a kid. But then, I think for real, I a few years ago I was really just at like a crossroads, and I was trying to figure out, I mean, kind of what spirituality meant to me. I won't like get into the whole roots of that for me personally, but like it was right as my Saturn return was starting, and I just wanted something that felt reflective and grounding and also like connected to something bigger, in all honesty.
mhm.
Um, just to like sort of help make sense of all the transformations that I felt like were happening around me. And I was having a hard time meditating because in those moments my brain just does not really love to shut off. So I just like, I remember being with a friend, and I had been like thinking about tarot a good amount. And then we were just like out one day, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to like rekindle this relationship and buy myself a deck and like see if that helps. And it just felt like totally the right thing to do because I hadn't touched it in years. And as I was like kind of practicing again, like as an adult and like building a relationship with the deck that felt like my own and not just like what I thought tarot should be, like I'd seen in movies or whatever, it really turned out to be more of like a moving meditation for me. Like it actually has, at least in my personal experience, has the ability to kind of quiet your brain because you are focused on like the interpretation and like, I don't know, like the shuffling of the cards and splitting the deck and feeling what's right and kind of paying attention. So it
Yeah.
felt really good. And again, like was a personal practice similar to like you're saying for a couple of years. And then I was like starting to do readings for friends and saw all of the um, ways that all these energies relate to like everyone. Like I think that's what
Mhm.
I still am so amazed by and love about tarot. Um Similar to what I was kind of saying of like I really was, I wasn't raised super religious necessarily, but I always loved the idea, and I still do. I love community and like connecting around like shared values. And I think that what tarot does so beautifully, and why I think it's a spectacular tool, is that it boils down these like incredibly complex experiences that sometimes have the ability to make us feel like we're the only ones who get this like specific nuance or like who are going through X, Y, and Z. And it just kind of reminds you that like we all go through these different, yeah, phases.
I like
Just
what you
kidding.
said about moving meditation because I
Yeah.
feel I feel drawn to that too. Especially, I mean, I think we're both people who are just kind of like nonstop and we have to be, I don't know, just sitting and meditating isn't always fruitful, I guess.
Totally
And
agree.
I think with tarot, yeah, I mean, you're focused and you're present, which is the point of meditation. So I think, yeah, it could definitely be part of that meditative practice.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, what does tarot look like for you today? Like, how are you using it in, I guess, not day to day right this second, but like in present day Kristen?
Present day Kristen goes in phases. So sometimes I'll have a period of like pulling cards every day. And then other times I just forget about it for a while because I'm so focused on other things. Or, I'll do it with each moon phase because my many moons planner reminds me to.
Yes.
um, yeah, so it really goes in phases. Um, and also if I remember, I'll do it at the turn of the month. So that's probably the one I most often keep in my schedule or in my practice is at the end of the month or the first of the month, I'll do a spread that's like what's something I can learn from the past month, what's something to take with me into the next month, and something new to begin in the next month. So it's
Love
just
that.
a quick and easy spread to do and also gets me thinking about, what's top of mind for me. And most of the time it's like business. um, but yeah, and also since I'm using a different deck now for my readings, I'll use the Rider-Waite cards for my altars. So rather than like pulling out cards from the one I'm actively using, and I obviously want to keep all of those in rotation, I'll just use a different deck for my altars. And so for the sync program, I set up an altar on my desk, on the corner of my desk. And I had a bunch of things around there, but I pulled three specific cards for it. I did the Three of Cups, the Ten of Pentacles, and the Ten of Cups. So I wanted to call in with this program community, financial security, and sustainability for me, and also joy. So all of those things I really wanted to manifest.
Mm.
Yeah. What about you?
Um, I ebb and flow. I mean, I think that sometimes I'm like pulling cards daily, sometimes weekly or with like the moon phases. I feel like the more recently, I feel like there's just been specific cards that have just been popping up. I don't know, I guess because of my relationship with tarot, like there are certain times where I'm like, "Oh man, I'm really in this energy," and I
Mm,
like it helps me like communicate my own emotions to myself, or I'm like, "Oh, I'm having like this kind of day." Um and so sometimes I just use it as kind of like a barometer of like, "Okay, well what would I say to a client
mhm,
if that came up for them, which maybe sounds silly, but if I'm being honest, like sometimes I avoid it when I need it the most because I'm not ready to hear what it has to say, which is not a great habit, I know, but it's kind of like when you, I always say to people, it's like when you avoid talking to the friend who will like actually real talk you, and instead you go to the person who will like console you or like sugarcoat things, like
yeah,
sometimes you're not ready for the real talk. And that's definitely the relationship that I personally have with tarot, where it's like it's always the thing that I'm like, I know that, but like how do I get through it? And it's like, yeah, you just have to be in it. That's how you get through it, which is hella annoying. um but I really actually like to use it as a guide to help me like show up in an aligned way. So whether I'm like pulling a card or just like thinking of a card and trying to work with it and embody it specifically, I do not use tarot in a predictive way at all. I find
me
that
neither.
personally just like deeply disempowering, because we all have free will, and like I think that being present with what is here is more important than knowing what's happening in the future. Um, but I do like to pull cards like before meetings or during calls or when I'm making a decision to sort of like help me reframe what is important or potent about this moment. Like I always say, like rather than it helping me like zoom into the future, it's actually helping me like zoom out and be like, okay, this maybe you're missing the bigger picture here. Like this is
Mhm.
about this thing. And that's helpful for me because I can get very tunnel vision in my life. So, I think that like anything else, because I use it so often in my work, it's not something I always reach for personally
Mhm.
anymore in the same way. But again, it's like prepping for this episode. I'm like, oh, I should be doing this more,
I
and I
think
still love it.
it's I think it's important to just emphasize what you said about not using it as a predictive tool. Because I feel
Yeah.
like that's where especially new readers can get stuck is thinking like, "Oh my god, this is gonna happen," you know? It's more just like, how do you feel about that potential occurrence, you know? How do you feel if you pull the tower, how do you feel about things like the foundations being changed, you know? How do you feel about death? How do you feel about, a cycle ending, you know? It's I think it's easy to be scared by the cards, but yeah, I like what you said about it being disempowering to use it that way.
Yeah, I just think it like takes the emphasis off of the fact that we all have the ability to like, yes, do things. This is not to say that things don't happen and that there aren't systems in place that like, we also don't have full control of what happens, but I think that by looking to predictability is taking us out of like, what do I actually have, power over in this moment that could help me move forward in a way that feels good, or reflect on what feels hard about this moment or what I need. I think it just, yeah, it just has an interesting way of feeling less, yeah, less empowered. And I just feel like this tool is so helpful in, I don't know, like boosting what is powerful and what is potent and what is intelligent about our emotions and about our experiences, that using it as just like, oh, this card showed up, so that means like someone's going to break up with you, or you're going to meet, someone great, or you're going to get a new opportunity. It's like that just feels like such a throwaway, you know?
Mhm.
Um I've had readings like that, like I'm sure if anyone has gotten readings, that there's like a huge range of readers, and it's always funny when you get someone who's like pretty old school and they're like, oh, the knight of, whatever, the knight of swords is showing up. Do you know anyone? I'm seeing like a tall man with dark features. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I no. I personally, like, I'm just not about that, because then I like, you're just primed to look for those kind of things. And
Yeah,
I'd rather
exactly.
be told like I have what I need within me to do the best that I can do. Not necessarily exactly what I want, but the best that I can do. And I think that
Yeah.
that's what tarot's capable of.
You have a tall, dark, handsome man inside of you.
I do. I sure as fuck do. So like we mentioned at the top, this would be a long episode. I mean, it's already probably pretty long. If we attempted to dive into the meaning of every single card in the deck. Tarot is an amazing tool because we can always learn more. We can always dive deeper, but there's also a lot to gain just from understanding the basic form and having a trusted resources to investigate, the symbols or cards, etc. So basically we want to break down the tarot's three main like parts, for lack of a better term. As we mentioned, the deck in total has 78 cards, and it consists of the major arcana, the minor arcana, and the court cards, which technically the court cards are part of the minors, but I think that they have a really special flavor, so I like to call them out specifically.
Yeah, and so we'll start with the major arcana. The majors are the 22 big picture, high energy cards that reflect what is called the Fool's Journey. So the Fool is the first card. It's technically card 0, and it's where the deck begins. So the major arcana takes us through the process of spiritual development and enlightenment. And if that sounds heady, it's because it is. And each of these cards, they build upon one another and they tell a story. So it would be, if you are brand new to this, I recommend laying them all out so you can
Mm-hmm.
see the story all at once. And so when these cards show up, you want to pay attention to the bigger picture, the life lessons in those cards, karmic influences, and the big archetypal themes within them.
Yeah, totally. I always see the majors as an invitation to like zoom out a bit and see the current moment through a different lens. I think it's really important to remember like I don't want to say they're like grand scheme cards, but sometimes it's like they show up in these moments where I'm like, oh, I don't know that I thought that this question was that important, but actually it is like indicative of, this value that I'm working on, or this, you know, habit I'm trying to break, or X, Y, and Z. So the majors are really, really special. They're probably the cards that, like, if you've seen the tarot in pop culture, you've probably seen majors, they like
Mhm.
often talk about like the death card, or like, what was that fucking bad movie with like Amy Poehler and Tina Fey and stuff that came out, like Wine Country or
Oh
whatever, on
god.
Netflix?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And they had like a tarot
They
reader
had the
come, and it
tarot
was like
reader.
she just pulled like all majors. It was like the sun, death, the hanged one, like it
It's
was.
always like that. And yeah, and you'll see, like, I've seen also beer cans use like the tarot, like the major, the way it looks like
Yes.
as their art, which I think is kind of cool. But yeah, it's like that's what you usually see when you see a depiction of a tarot card.
Right. So like you're probably relatively at least familiar with like some of the imagery.
Mhm.
Um but they are like they're big energy cards, and again, they're like there's 22 out of the 78. So when they show up, I always say like you want to pay attention, right? You just want to really understand what they're here to say. So
Mhm.
we also love the majors because they're very cyclical. So like throughout the fool's journey, you encounter similar themes but at different levels of like intensity or ego, which I always think is kind of cool and allows for a lot of like flavor and depth and nuance. Um, and shows you that you're kind of like always evolving through these like different levels of the same the same song and dance, which is simultaneously maddening but also kind of comforting in a way. And once you complete the journey, quote unquote, with the world card, which is card technically 22 but numbered 21, because as you recall, the fool is 0. You will eventually like be invited to revisit the fool again and move through the process again on a new plane, having lived through different experiences and outcomes, etc. So I always find that that's a really helpful framing as well. Like, you don't master them and then you're done. They're not like boxes that you check. You're
Right.
always going to be invited to like find a different angle or lens.
I think that kind of calls back to the cyclical activism episode when we talked about how you're always learning something new, and like the cycle just repeats again. So you're the fool once again, and then you have to go through that journey.
Yes, absolutely. That's such a good example. Do you have like a major card that you're working with right now that you feel like you're like kind of getting to know, or
Yes. So last
sure.
year, what? What are you laughing
I
at?
was just like, yes.
Yes. Funny you ask. So last year I decided the card I wanted to work with for 2020 was strength.
Mm.
And yeah. Have I needed that badly this year? So also what was funny was shortly after deciding that and using it as a guide for some of my spreads like late last year, like in preparation for 2020, I was in Salem. I went to Jaho Coffee. And have you been to that one?
I haven't actually.
Well, when you order, they give you, and when you order and go sit at your table, you know how you normally get like a number or something to
Hmm.
put on your table? They have tarot cards as their table cards instead.
Cute.
And it's all, again, it's all the majors. So the one they gave me was strength. And I was like, it's a sign.
Oh, I love that.
But it just felt so aligned. So, even as that focus has gotten a little bit lost in the chaos of this year, I think that the work I did with it late last year and early this year kind of set me up for success and put those intentions in motion. And you and I were talking earlier this week about how with it since the pandemic started, we literally just like haven't stopped. We've just been go, go, go because, if we don't work, we don't have like a salary. If we could just like sit back and our employer is going to still pay us. But um, so while I'm definitely going to burn out at some point, I mean, I definitely feel it physically. And I still think that that work that I've done with that card has kind of been able to keep me going. And I've also pulled it reversed a lot this year, which to
Interesting.
me, I took that as vulnerability. So, something we're intimately familiar with this year. And, embracing vulnerability is really the bravest thing that you can do, that the strongest thing you can do. So, it's a little bit of surrender too. And I think that knowing when to surrender takes a lot of strength. So, you could say I'm working with one. Yeah.
Sure. No big deal.
And what about your card for this year or lately, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been feeling like I'm feeling called to work with the Hanged One right
Mhm.
now, just because that card really is about like you just said, like surrender, and not surrender to like this peaceful place of like, okay, I'm just gonna like let go and let God or whatever. Like truly like surrender and like the acknowledging that that is also still uncomfortable. Like surrender doesn't mean just like finding peace and, tranquility.
Mhm.
And I just feel, especially this month, honestly, since like probably mid-August, I've been feeling like I'm in this holding pattern, and just staying present through that, and rather than like resisting, finding a way to surrender and still acknowledge that like that isn't gonna, still not gonna feel great, um, is just coming up for me a lot. That's not a card that I find comes, at least for my clients, like that comes up a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and which is kind of interesting. Like there are some cards where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I feel like everyone's pulling this right now. So I've, specifically pulled this card out. It's kind of one, like I was saying earlier, that has just kind of been popping into mind for me. So I've kind of pulled it out of my deck and I've just kind of been like trying to work with it and meditate on it and ask it questions specifically like before I go into a meditation or something. So that's been helpful. Still uncomfortable. It's not really solving any problems, but it's at least giving me perspective.
Well, I
And
mean,
I'm also, oh, sorry.
no. No, I was just gonna say that it can be uncomfortable to if you're not used to that feeling or the act of surrendering and acknowledging that like things are out of your control, but also when you think about things that are out of your control, isn't it a little bit freeing to know that you don't have to control certain things? It's just kind of like, I don't know. I guess it could be uncomfortable to think of it that way, but I don't know.
Yeah, I
Just
think
another
it like is
perspective.
and it isn't. I think that with the
Yeah.
Hanged One, or at least with my experience with it right now, it feels very much like um you, again, like I think I had a an understanding and like a belief that I, through all of these spiritual practices and ways that I've like intentionally set up my life, that I understood that I'm not always in control and that I was like, working through some of the beliefs or systems that like I felt like have been, have been created by society at large. And I think once you start going through the process of surrendering and shedding, you also become aware of like the places where you've actually been still holding on to those
Hmm.
things even though you don't believe in them, and it's just like this really weird uncomfortable detangling, um which is okay, but oof, it's a real doozy. The Hanged One is a dooz.
Yeah.
So, but I'm also in a sun year, which on the flip side has been kind of fun to play with. I've had that card from the Spolia deck that I was talking about earlier pulled out on my altar, like on my desk for the whole year, and have kind of incorporated some of the I without getting like too much into like all the things that I do occasionally. Like I do I do kind of like to write, like, I don't know if they're necessarily like mantras, maybe let's call them affirmations for when I'm meditating, because again, like my brain just will make to-do lists if I don't give it something else to do. And so I kind of like wrote some affirmations based on the sun card at the beginning of the year that I've been working with through the year, and they've felt
Oh, that's a really
really
good
good.
idea.
Yeah, it's a really nice one. I really like, again, like I think that's a nice way to kind of incorporate and like come back to. And I always feel like there's like a few words that will pop up when I'm working with a card. So just like having those top of mind to get to play with is kind of cool. So I've been doing that with the sun, which again is
Nice.
like a pretty happy one to say an affirmation about
Yeah.
during during the day. But yeah, I mean, the majors are huge. We'll talk about resources at the end of the pod about like where you can learn more specifically about each of the cards. But there's also amazing guidebooks and things like that. So next we have the minor arcana, which I always like to say is like most similar to a playing card deck. So you'll see ace through 10 plus the court cards, which we'll talk about separately, in 4 different suits. So if you go back to the episode where we talked about the elements, I'll have to, do you know what episode that was off the top of your head?
I sure don't.
Here, let me.
It'll be in the notes.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put that in the, so if you go back to the episode where we talked all about the elements, you'll learn more specifically about each suit and each element. But Kristen, do you want to kind of give a quick reminder of what area of life each suit rules?
Yes. So the pentacles rule Earth, or they're ruled by Earth, and that traditionally regards the physical realm, so work, money, and habits. Then we have the swords, which are ruled by air, so that's more of the mental realm, and that's our thoughts, our beliefs, and how we communicate. And then the wands are ruled by fire, and that's the creative realm, our actions, what we're manifesting, how we evolve. And the cups are ruled by water, which is more of the emotional aspect. So our feelings, our intuition, and the deepest parts of us. So pentacles, physical, swords, mental, wands, creativity, and cups, emotions.
Yes. So there's like obviously a lot of flavor that we can get into in the minors, because they, I think, are very nuanced and specific, which is awesome. So, in addition to looking at what suit you pulled specifically, which kind of points you to what area, what area of the map you're on, you can also look and pair the number with that suit and kind of think again about how that kind of shows up for you. Of course, like we said, there's a million amazing guidebooks and resources. I think that the best thing I did, and Kristen, I'd be curious if you agree, of like the best thing I did in learning about tarot and deepening my personal relationship with the decks that I'm using is like looking up the meaning, sure, but also like really thinking about like what does this symbolize to me? Like what does this bring up? What is it making me feel? Asking specific questions. It definitely feels more aligned that way, but I did want to give kind of an overview of just like the 10, like the numerology, I guess. So if you look at the minors, the ace is kind of initiation. Twos are about balance. Threes, collaboration. Four, kind of the foundation or stability. Fives, contraction. Six, expansion. Sevens, sort of a reframe or a transition. Eights are transformation. Nines are like the climaxes or occasionally a sacred pause. And 10 is completion. So, again, if you just kind of look at how those things kind of relate and how they feel connected to you, for example, say you receive the Three of Wands. What does the idea of creative collaboration look like? How can you embody that energy? How do you feel about that idea at this time? This is kind of looking at it this way can be, you can kind of see how the tarot can be a tool for sharpening and building our intuition, relying on trusted resources, yes, but also like letting it speak to us uniquely, if that makes sense. The major arcana, the minor arcana can sort of point more to like our day-to-day actions that we can take as well. So it can be a really fun area of the tarot to begin exploring individually, like just even meditating on some of those themes before you even pull a card, like kind of doing a mix and match. Again, maybe I'm just a nerd who wants to do stuff like that, but I would recommend it. And just overall, I really like the analogy of like, if you're hoping to grow a plant, let's say, or plant a garden, the minor arcana is everything that we seemingly can control, right? Selecting where we plant it, digging the dirt, watering the seedling, pruning, etc., etc. The things that we like make a conscious decision to do and then either do or do not do. The major arcana is all of the work that we kind of can't really see from the surface, where nature takes its course. There's like the surrender and the trust and the co-creation. So the things that are happening below the surface, the fact that sometimes you plant two of the exact same seeds in the exact same spot right next to each other, and one blooms beautifully and one doesn't, even though you've treated them the same. It's kind of that like magical force, if that makes sense. I always feel like that's a little bit of a helpful trick to think about the difference between the majors and the minors.
With the minor and the major, it's kind of like the micro and the macro, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Lastly, we have the court cards. I like to call the court cards out specifically because they're special. So, I think to both of us, they symbolize embodiment and how we can best show up in an aligned way at a particular moment in time. And each court card has a role. Janine, do you want to tell us what that is?
Yeah, totally. So the pages are students. So you can kind of ask yourself, like, how can we be curious, experimental, playful? The knights are transformers or actors. So we can ask, how can we catalyze change or movement? The queens are really nurturing. So how can we be the most caring and compassionate? And the kings are really about mastery. So, how can we express our skills or understanding? I think that they are really powerful in the sense of, again, like rather than in some more traditional interpretations, the court cards point to other people, people who will come into our lives and serve a specific role. I really like using the court cards as like different aspects of ourselves.
Hmm.
So I think that those kind of framings of like page as student, knight as transformer or actor, queen as nurturer, king as master is really helpful because it tells you, I think, even thinking about those four uh, roles, if you want to call them that, like how like energetically that just feels different, right? If I'm showing up as a student versus a nurturer, like I know
Right.
that that's going to look totally different.
I've
um
also heard the queen and king as like internal mastery and external mastery. So, but that I guess nurturer can kind of be the same thing as internal mastery, right?
yeah, totally. I really think that like the queens the queens have a lot of depth to them. Like I think that it is definitely more of an internal focus. Like the court cards, which we definitely don't have time to deep dive into, but they're also double elemented. So the queens are ruled by water as well. So they are that kind of like internal, intuitive, like I don't want to say like self-preservation necessarily, but like yeah, taking care of and understanding what you need in a particular situation, which I
Hmm.
find to be really powerful when the queens show up in a reading of like, okay, what do you need to do in order to like feel safe or feel protected or feel empowered in this situation rather than like what will get you the outcome necessarily, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like I said, yeah, the court cards are also double elemented, which is super cool, and it makes them feel very rich and very like deep. We could get totally into the weeds about this. I could nerd out about the court cards specifically like all day long. But if you guys are really into this, maybe we could do a special court card episode at some point, because I would really love to dive deeper there. I think there's a lot of relationship to cycles, and embodiment, and especially self-care with the court cards. So they're really fun. Don't be afraid
Yeah.
of them. I think sometimes, again, like there's the court cards can be like the most confusing element, but there's a lot of really amazing resources out there.
Yeah. So if all of this sounds maybe a little overwhelming, it doesn't have to be. Don't be, like Janine just said, don't be afraid of the cards. The easiest way to start is to just pull a card daily. And that'll get you in a practice of reading. It'll get you familiar with the cards and the symbolism of the cards. And what do you see? That's the very first thing before you even pull up the guidebook. What is it that you see? What does that mean to you? What do you think is going on in the card? How do you think it relates to your day, or if you had a specific question? And then if you feel like you really can't figure it out, then you can start focusing on like the puzzle pieces that we have here for you. So the court cards and what those means, or the elements, or the number of the card and what that might mean. So yeah, it's like it could be a little bit of a puzzle piece, or you just rely solely on your intuition. Regardless, whatever comes up for you is what's right versus what the guidebook says. Because sometimes even when you look at the guidebook, you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Do you ever have that experience?
Oh my God, totally. And like sometimes I think, especially like depending on the intention of the person who made the deck, like specifically if you're looking in your deck's guidebook, or like if you're using one deck, but then you look up, like you just go to Biddy Tarot to look up the meaning of the card. It's like sometimes they just don't have the same
Yeah.
alignment. So again, I think if you, not to sound like annoying, but I think it's like if you read the description of a card and you're like, that doesn't make any sense at all, it's actually a really interesting point to be like, okay, well then what does make sense?
Yeah.
Like there's if something is not true, then what actually does feel aligned? I don't know if
Hmm.
that makes sense, but like sometimes I'm like, oh no, that's definitely not it. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That means I know somewhere in there what is it.
Yeah. You just have to dig a little.
Yeah, exactly.
And also another thing, if that one card doesn't make any sense to you, pull another one. Not as a replacement, but as an additional
Clarifier.
layer. Yeah, a clarifier. And then the more cards you pull, I mean, I think just one daily can be fine, but then if you add a couple more, like see what's happening in the cards, like what's happening in the individual cards, but then also the story of the cards, everything as a whole. So it
Yes.
could be fun to do. It could be a little frustrating to do also if you have those moments where things just don't make sense, but you know, it's your practice to make it make sense. And then, as you learn, you can I like to journal about it so you can track your readings, write them down, and I'll keep track of the ones that or keep track of all of your readings, but then also you can look back and reflect on the things you've pulled, how things have changed, if there are any cards or suits or whatever that keeps coming up for you, or if you keep pulling the same card reversed, or whatever the patterns are. um, that can give you some really good insight. And also, the daily card, try embodying that card for the day. And then at the end of the day, reflect on how that felt and how it went. There's lots of different ways that you can go about it, but whatever feels the most comfortable for you to start is probably the way to go. Um, Janine, I'm curious if there's anything that continuously pops up for you in terms of specific cards or suits or whatever.
Mm, I feel like, I mean, when I first started reading tarot, like I said, I was at this moment of like Saturn return and all these transformations and whatever, and like I was pulling the Ten of Swords like literally every other day, which is hilarious. It's just like not the most fun card to have show up. It's base, and I feel like I've developed kind of like an interesting relationship with that card that's not doom and gloom, but is really just like calling me out for being like melodramatic, like and getting in my own way.
Yeah, I don't think
Which
any of
means
them
it
are
still
doom and
shows
gloom.
up. Yeah. It's like, so that was interesting. And I do feel like when I personally do feel like I am drawn to tarot is when I'm in this space of like needing to make decisions or feeling like my brain is kind of like, I'm kind of like in this um, sort of like not necessarily spiraling place, but like I can't get out of my own head. So in that way,
Mhm.
I do feel like the swords come up for me a lot because it's this relationship with like our mental realm and like how we're communicating what we need, what we believe, what we're allowing ourselves to like think and do. So
Mhm.
yeah, I've done a lot of work with the swords and continue. What about you?
I find that I pull pentacles all the time. And it's
Oh,
I like at the
interesting.
point where I'm wondering, I'm like, am I just like shit at shuffling?
So
But
funny.
I think it's partly because I mean, business is on my mind all the time, but also feeling kind of alone in as a business owner. Like I work by myself. I'm by myself all the time. Like Janine, you are probably the only other business owner that I regularly talk to and like bounce ideas off of. And I feel like I use tarot a lot for questions around my business. So it kind of feels like a business consultant almost.
Oh, I totally agree. I love that.
So yeah, so it's really interesting that those always pop up for me. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, so for people who are starting and maybe if they want to go a little beyond pulling a single card every morning, are there some simple spreads that you recommend?
Yeah, I would say like first of all, I'm saying this because I probably needed to hear it when I was starting. Like one card is plenty. There is so much to learn and glean from like the imagery and the meaning and the like all of the symbols of one card. But if you're like, say there's a full moon on Halloween and you want to do something like a little bit more special, I really like three three as just like a number in general. And I think that simple three card spreads like either past, present, and future. If you're like moving into a new phase, that could be a good one to do on which is New Year, aka Halloween. Um, Sometimes I like to pull for like mind, body, and spirit if I'm trying to look for like a more self care focused reading for myself or for someone else. Um, I think that if you want to just do two, sometimes it can be helpful to pull like what is active or what is in abundance or what is asking to work with me. Um, one card for that kind of area and one card for like what is being asked to be released or what do I no longer need. That can be really helpful and clarifying, particularly in moments if you feel like you have what seems like a simple decision, but maybe doesn't feel like one. Um, and then you can also do like a card for yourself and where you're at, a card for your potential, and a card for the path to get there. So, like where you're headed and like how you're working. I really like to pull cards with the intention of like tools to use. Like I feel like that's something even when I'm just pulling a single card for myself, I don't really ask like where am I at? I'm really asking more like what do I need to use
Hmm.
or like what can I embody or something like that. So I think that can be really fun too. But also like tarot is so obviously like layered and creative and intuitive that like if something pops up and you can pull cards for like you and your work life, your personal life, like there's so many things you can do wherever you're feeling called. You can make a spread.
Hmm.
Like you don't need anyone to make them for you, but
Yeah, you can ask your own questions.
Yeah, totally.
If you're looking for some other resources, I really like the Between the Worlds podcast. If maybe used to be called Strange Magic, which is still in the feed and that deep dives into all the majors, but now Between the Worlds is going into all of the minors, like all of them. So they have like hour-long episodes seriously deep diving on each card. So if you really want like a study on it, I think that's a great awesome resource. Then there's the Biddy Tarot site. So that'll just give you um, an interpretation of the card. It describes the traditional Rider Waite cards, and then also it gives you the descriptions for upright and reversed pulls. So that can be really helpful. Then there's the book 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollack. And there's also Lindsay Mack's Tarot for the Wild Soul podcast. And she also teaches Soul Tarot School Tour. Wait, I can't say that. Tongue twister. Soul Tarot School courses. I don't know why that was so hard to say.
Oh my God, no worries.
Say it 10 times fast. Also, one that I forgot to put here, Jessica Dorr. She teaches
Oh
classes as
yeah.
well,
Oh
and
my
I
gosh.
I haven't taken them, but she is brilliant, and I love her reading, so I can imagine that her tarot classes are also really great. So that's another
An
one to look for.
excellent follow on Twitter if you would
Yes.
like to bless your Twitter feed with something that isn't totally a nightmare.
She also does a trauma-informed tarot class.
Yeah,
I think it's more for people who want to read professionally, but I'm not 100% sure. But we'll link to her site in the show notes so you could check that out.
yeah, definitely. Whew, you guys,
So fun.
so fun. I'm like, I just want to go play with tarot all day.
Yeah.
Feels nice. Feels like rekindling. Coming home. Coming home. But this has been amazing. We want to know, well, I first of all, I want to know what decks people use. Like I said, I try not to look at a ton of them because there's so many good ones, but I would just be curious what resonates and
I'm
tell
going to
us
send
if
you a
you
list of
try
all the ones I
anything.
want.
Yes. Oh my God, please. But yeah, tag us on Instagram at It's Just a Phase Pod. Email us photos of your spreads at It's Just a Phase Pod at gmail.com. If you liked what you heard today, we'd love for you to leave us a review on iTunes. It helps people like you who are interested in politics and tarot and mood phases and all the awesome stuff that we talk about find our show. And we love when you do. So thank you for those of you who have left reviews. And if you haven't already, we'd really appreciate it. And as always, just thanks for being here. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Send us
Oh,
your costumes if
witching.
you dress up on Zoom.
Yeah. Yes. If you're going to a Zoom Halloween party, we're sorry. We totally made fun of it, but please send us pictures of your costumes or tell us your favorite costume as a kid. Ugh,
Yeah. Oh, send us pictures. That'd be fun.
yes, totally.
All right. Enjoy the full moon.
Ow.